Hey there folks. So we've created a tile set that we can use now to have our individual 16 by 16, in this case, kind of individual tiles. Obviously that value is going to match up with whatever tile set you are using and creating. As we saw in the tiny swords examples here, they're 64 by 64. So I'm not going to say that this is the specific number. What I want you to look at is what size yours should be. But how do we actually start putting all of these together and using them to create a level? Well, we can't just get a tile map or a tile set like this. Let's just go back to the one that we're using, which is here. We can't get that and just drag it into our world and use it, in terms of a level or a map. It creates this thing here, but this isn't something I can actually use. It's just a tile set. So what we need to do instead is we need to create tile maps. And if we've looked in this paper 2D section, you'll see we've got tile sets, the thing we just created, and then tile maps. And you can see here it is a 2D grid, which has a defined width and height. That's a number of tiles. So we're going to define how big our level section is going to be. For example, it might be 10 tiles wide and 10 tiles high. And we can have different layers. So we can have foreground, midground, background. And each one of those tiles is going to use a visual from a tile set. So we're going to use our tile sets basically as modular reusable tile pieces that we can use to make playable levels. So let's get all these bits set up for us. I'm going to create a new folder just for now and call this one tile sets. And do you know what? The tile set belongs in there for me. And then I'm also going to create myself a tile map. Now there are options to have a look at. Maybe if you're looking at your tile sets, you will see some things that come up in here, such as like create tile map. We'll look at condition in a future one. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here to paper 2D and create myself a blank tile map. And I'm going to call this one, let's go with TM for tile map. And we'll go with this one being demo zone. I'm not going to call it level, only because I don't necessarily have to build the whole level in one map. What you could do is you could have your whole level made as one tile map, or what you could do is you could have lots of sections, and that would be way more reusable, modular, and easier to edit. There are constraints and restrictions with how tile maps work in Unreal. Things like trying to add in extra tiles to the left or to the top become problematic. So working in small little chunks is actually a much better way to go with this. I'm just going to put tile map at the end, just for me, for my filtering and searching. And I'm going to open this up. And the first thing that we're going to notice is that we've got this square in the middle. The square in the middle shows me it is a certain amount of tiles. So right now it's 4 by 4. On the left hand side, we've got this tile set selector, where I can basically select a tile set, like what we've just created, that I can use to paint this middle level bit. And on the right hand side, we've got the actual properties and the details of not just the tile map as a whole, but also individual layers. So like I just said, we can do foreground, midground, background. We can actually even go way more detailed than that and have things like foreground details, foreground and foreground background, and splitting lots and lots of layers up. So have lots of things in front or behind of each other. So for now, the first thing I'm going to do to get this started is first of all define the map width and the map height. I'm not going to go really stupid with this because really massive numbers, as I've said, are going to constrain and restrict us, but also we just want to have a very simple test. We want to replace those default cubes in our level with something our character can walk on. So things like 10 by 10, just to get me started, will give me something there. Maybe 15, so I've got enough space for my character to walk left and right. Now here, I've got nothing to be able to paint on. I'm clicking on this and there's nothing for me to paint on here. So what we're going to do is go over to Active Tile Set, and we can use this with this little pick an asset from a pop-up menu to pick from all the tile sets that exist in my project. Now as we go through, our project might start filling up with loads of these, and you can see I've got the tiny swords ones, which I'll demo in a bit when we're looking at our top down. I've got this demo collision sheet that I will show in a video as well, and I've got this one that we've just looked at with our side scroller kind of tile set. Okay, so with that added, now you can see that it's visible here, and I can use the scroll wheel to zoom in and out if I need to look at some of these tiles. I can press and hold the right mouse button to kind of pan and look around that, so I don't need to be kind of restricted to be looking at it from a really zoomed out view. I can zoom in quite heavily with that, and what you can see is I can left click on a tile. Now with that left clicked tile, and I come over here, you can see that I can now add this tile in. And one of the things that you'll notice is that that tile is only taking up a quarter of this section that's being painted. And the reason for that is because the tile width of the actual tile map itself is being set up so that every single tile, I've got 15 of them wide, but every single one of them is 32 by 32. Now, problem I have here is that if this was, for example, a 32 by 32, that would fill in perfectly, but I don't. I have a 16 by 16. So I need to go into here and define that, and it's going to look like it's got smaller. It has got smaller, but only in so much as that now every single one of those individual tiles is the same size as the individual tile I'm adding. And what I can do is I can left click and I can click and individually add them in, or I can click and drag and just paint them in. Now I've got this repeated floor across the bottom here, and you can see 16 by 16, that looks fine. I can go to the eraser and I can just erase them out if I need to be. And if I do paint them in, so let's paint these ones and go to a different one, you can see that painting over it, if they're both on the same layer, they will override, because you can only ever have one tile being displayed per layer. So you can see here, painted all in. Now, I said about changing the size. One of the things you could look at is that if this was 8 by 8, you can see that now these tiles would take up twice as much space, and we'd only be painting with the bottom left corner, but by doing so, I could actually use this to kind of offset them from each other, which is useful when you've got things that maybe like this, where it's a smaller detail, and I can control exactly where that detail is going to go. So there is benefits to having these not be exactly the same, but for the most part, what we're going to find is that having your tile map and your tile set matching up with each other is going to be a much better way of going about this. Okay, so let's just paint this in, and the other option I'm going to show you is that you can just take something, so for example this grey, and I can fill. So you can see I can just paint in that whole background there and just fill it in. Now, with that done, what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to come into here with my actual level, and I'm going to take that tile map that we just created, and I'm just going to drag it in. And you'll be able to see that this is actually not that big of a level in terms of what we've actually got. I'm just going to snap it down so it meets up. That's a very, very small level. And this would be where we need to start thinking about now, like what scale do we run these at? You know, if I go and press play and look at that in relation to my character, they are very small in here. Now, does that mean that actually what's happened is I've got the wrong texture sizes? So I've done this on purpose, only because I want to show you that if you haven't set these up in the project settings, one of the things that can happen here in relation to actually setting up your kind of your tiles is that the properties of your dark tiles and everything here with my tile set could actually be the complete wrong pixel size. Yeah, this is one of the first things that we set up here, and you can see my pixels per Unreal unit has defaulted here to 1. So one of the things that we might just need to do is just make sure that if we go into our project and just make sure that whatever pixels per unit we are setting up as, so if I say pixels, you can see that the default of 1 is being used for my tile map. So if I use this at 0.25 and save and update this, I'm not going to see it changing in here, but new tile maps will update, and now 0.25, you can see that obviously this is 4 times bigger. And the one that we're putting into our level now, so I drag this in, that is a much bigger level. So I've just shown you that just so that I can prove that, you know, if you didn't set it up in the project settings the first time, it is definitely something to think about, because every single one of our characters, every single one of our tile maps and tile sheets is going to need to have that as a uniform value. Now the flickering you can see there is something we're going to fix much later on. We just need to condition our tile maps and our tile sets when they're finished. So don't worry about it right now, it is perfectly fine. But how do I get this actually working? It is fine that it is in the level. So what we're going to do is we're going to say, how do we get rid, in the next video, we'll get rid of all these default cubes and actually make it so our character is walking on that tile map. So we no longer need to have any of this other stuff. Our level is just literally made of tile maps and our character walking on them. Thanks for watching, folks. If you enjoyed this video, then please consider subscribing to access more of my Unreal Engine content.